Okay. We are here now with on screen author Karen Tate. Reverend Dr. Karen Tate, she has published at least six books. She's a social justice activist, a speaker. She was named one of the 13 most influential women in goddess spirituality. She is a wisdom keeper of the goddess spirituality movement. For over a decade, she hosted the radio show Voices of the Sacred Feminine, which is having a reboot, I think. That recently her work has been growing in taking on new dimensions. She gives talks at all kinds of different venues. She's spoken at the Council or the Parliament of World Religions, at the Joseph Campbell Roundtables. She's in the film Femme, Women Healing the World. One of the books that she's written is called Sacred Places of the Goddess, 108 Destinations. And she's journeyed to a number of different goddess sites around the world, one of the foremothers who's inspired my travels as well. And today she is going to be talking with us about Sekhmet. And she's going to be taking a really amazing perspective and helping us to kind of see the difference between Sekhmet as kind of a myth and Sekhmet as reality. Her title of her talk is The Real Sekhmet, Deity, Archetype, and Ideal. Welcome, Reverend Dr. Karen Tate.
Hi, ladies. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this. I wanted to be there so much. I signed up for this months and months ago, and I just have a terrible, terrible cold and just could not make it. But I'm glad I can at least participate this much. And I'll be doing good if I don't cough throughout the whole talk. So send me some good healing energy here. But yeah, Sekhmet has become very important to me, I'd say, over the last decade. And I really wanted to share how I see her and how I believe she can be an incredible role model, archetype, and ideal or values for women as we try to live through patriarchy right now. So growing up, I can remember my mother saying it's a man's world. I didn't understand what that meant all those years ago, that a woman's options for jobs was limited. She couldn't get credit on her own. She might be disparaged for daring to want more for her life than being a homemaker, living without equal pay, birth control and abortion rights, and all the rest. And yet all this was normal back then. It wasn't seen as injustice or abuse. It's no wonder many women suffered psychological wounding from these patriarchal limits placed on them, and possibly even passed these wounds along to their daughters as ancestral trauma. Every March during Women's History Month, we're reminded of these patriarchal truths by the dearth of historical information available about women. Though gradually, I think today's women are changing that for our daughters and granddaughters, but women still have much to overcome in this patriarchal society. We have not yet achieved equality, and we've had major setbacks like the Supreme Court taking away a woman's rights to her reproductive health and body that affects, among other things, her emotional, economic, and educational future. Rape is still a weapon of war. Rearing its ugly head is censorship in school curriculums, which will leave kids ignorant of our country's actual history of domination and the history of those not white or male. We're still dealing with toxic masculinity, men called incels who believe women should be available to them at their whim, sexism, misogyny, infanticide, racism, and the violence of Christian nationalism. There's still the Seven Mountains Mandate among Dominionists, Christians, conservative Pentecostals, and evangelicals who want to control society through the 7 areas of family, religion, education, media, entertainment, business, and government, relegating women to little more than submissive breeders. And many of these dominionists got as far as the Oval Office in the White House during the Trump presidency and or running for office again. While we still don't have gender equality in Congress, with only about 20% of members being women, we are standing up and fighting back in ways my mother and hers never dreamed possible. And right now in 2023, we do have more women governors than ever before in history, and the first female vice president. The Me Too movement and Black Lives Matter movements made headway for women and Black and brown people. And the media helps us see mixed race couples and gay, lesbian, and trans people as normal and part of a healthy society. But another new development that I want to talk about here primarily is in the last handful of decades, because change happens way too slowly, is the reclamation of goddess, or the feminine face of God. And with her comes sacred feminine liberation theology, setting us free from patriarchal values and structures, and instead teaches the sacredness of life, the equality of women, our mandate to connect with and become wise stewards of nature, and embrace the values of freedom, compassion, equality, justice, peace, nurturing, intuition, partnership, and empathy. While there are many goddesses to reach toward this quest, Sekhmet, the lion-headed Egyptian goddess, is one deity, archetype, or role model that offers women a beacon of light toward empowerment to shake off patriarchal shackles. To begin with, those who know and love Sekhmet will tell you the myth out in the world about her rampage is probably patriarchal propaganda. So I suggest maybe you take it with a grain of salt. There's not much in the story worth keeping if you want to know Sekhmet, but to be thorough, I'll give a thumbnail sketch. The Egyptian sun god Ra, also Sekhmet's father, became annoyed with humans because they were becoming too rebellious and not offering him proper devotion. Hathor, in the form of the more ferocious Sekhmet, set out to rectify the problem and went on a rampage, killing those ungrateful humans. When the Council of Gods determined she was going too far, they flooded the fields and drugged beer tinted with red ochre so it would appear to be blood. The bloodthirsty Sekhmet lapped up the beer and fell asleep, ceasing her rampage. So it's been said drunkenness saved humanity from Sekhmet's killing spree. Some think this story is an Egyptian parallel story to the one of the Great Flood, where God chose to cleanse the world of evil men. Could be. Interesting comparison, but there's so much wrong with this patriarchal myth. Delving closer, we have a petty male god, angry because he's not getting enough attention rather than a beneficent one. The daughter becomes a mercenary in service to her father's authority and sociopathy and slaughters humanity. This is not typical of goddess myths and more an allegory to perhaps warn us about falling prey to enablers of sociopaths or sociopaths themselves. It is perhaps a story to warn us against obeying misguided male authority, or patriarchal disinformation to warn us, women and men, not to trust female power or judgment. After all, we've all heard the sexist remarks about how dangerous and unreliable, emotional, or hysterical women can be. I'm sure there's more to be gleaned from this terrible myth that does not reflect the true nature of Sekhmet, but I'll leave further analysis of that early story alone. Here I'd like to share a reconstructed story of Sekhmet from the shreds that remain from antiquity and take some creative and spiritual license as those who feel divinely inspired have the responsibility to do, and retell her story in a contemporary context, showing Sekhmet's relevance for this age, particularly to women or anyone marginalized in society. I'll also share her essence from the perspective of an archetype or role model and the ideals or values of social justice she offers humanity to evolve and progress. Because after all, I believe goddess evolves as humanity evolves. Ancient Egyptians might have identified her power with the cruel harshness of the desert and called upon her to vanquish demons and disease. But today, most of us don't believe in demons, and we benefit from medical science. And you know what? We also enjoy air conditioning. So instead, while many might have called upon her to quell COVID, with that done, so to speak, we revive the call upon her to vanquish evil in the form of domination and patriarchy, or the rule of men. To begin with, there is not much written about Sekhmet in ancient times except the aforementioned myth, which helps us get into the heads of the people living at the time. Sekhmet quelled their fears. We know she was considered a mother goddess and a healer, something important at a time without modern medicine and high infant mortality rates. She was thought to be able to bring about or cure plagues. According to contemporary researcher of history and devotee of Sekhmet, Olivia Church, she says, the imagery of this blood-stained goddess breathing flies and pestilence into the unbearable summer air is exhilarating to imagine, unquote. Hold that image in your mind for a moment. I know I'd be quaking in my boots, feeling the mixed emotions of utter fear and adoration, and darn glad if she were on my side. Like many goddesses under ancient patriarchy, she became co-opted by the king or pharaoh as a war goddess to help him overcome his enemies. A recent restoration at the Temple of Esna in Egypt tells us Sekhmet had 7 arrows, which she used as messengers to deliver either goodness, justice, or her wrath. In ancient Egypt, she had many beautiful and poetic names, as well as names that suggest how Egyptians viewed her essence or domain. She was known as she who mauls, mistress of dread, one before whom evil trembles, all-powerful one. Some say she was the fierce version of the gentler feline goddesses Mut or Bast. Church continues on about the spectrum of Sekhmet's essence, saying, I also don't think that she's just that, referring to the fierce or scary descriptions. I also envision her surrounded by green papyrus, lazing with suckling cubs, or licking disease and pain off someone's skin with her cat tongue and healing purr. She's both extremes and everything in between, just like women and nature. So I exalt both. I praise the sustenance she offers at her breast, just as much as I set upwards to protect myself from her disease-wielding anger. And let's face it, she has a lot to be angry about these days, unquote. We also know about the Egyptian ritual called the Porch of Drunkenness from recent discoveries from the excavations of the Temple of Mut complex located near Luxor, Egypt. According to Dr. Betsy Bryan, the Festival of Drunkenness was celebrated at least annually, though sometimes twice a year during the reign of the female pharaoh Hatshepsut. This ritual was different than most because all the people participated in it, rather than just the pharaoh alone with temple clergy making offerings to a deity. In the festival or porch of drunkenness, elites and common people alike would engage in drinking and sex. The scene has been described in a hymn to Sekhmet, also called Saknet, meaning female magical power, as young women with flowing garlands in their hair served everyone Egypt's favorite drink, beer. They drank to the point of unconsciousness and were awakened to beating drums as temple clergy carried out a likeness of Hathor/Sekhmet for all to see, giving those gathered a chance to petition her for their needs. Some say in this drunk or unconscious state, they also hope to commune directly with the goddess. As for sex, graffiti was discovered that also mentioned traveling the marshes, a euphemism for having sex, which took place at these festivals at the beginning of the Nile floods around mid-August. That makes sense because the flooding of the Nile brought fertility and renewal of the land, so why not to humans too? Historically, beer seemed to have been an important element in ancient spiritual rituals, from the Sumerians with their beer goddess to evidence at places like the ancient site of Göbekli Tepe in Turkey. But that's a paper for another day. Records say there were between 600 and 800 statues of Sekhmet found in Egypt. Go in any good ancient history museum today and you're likely to find one. Replicas can even be found in Parisian subway stations, in California's Hearst Castle's elaborate gardens, at the Sekhmet Temple in Nevada, in home temples of her devotees, and in modern pagan temples and museums. In contemporary times, Robert Masters writes about what he calls her essential statues, seen in museums that contain her essence and might actually interact with visitors able to see her as she moves her head or facial features. While on the subject of her statues, I'll share my personal story of our Sekhmet statue. We stumbled onto a replica of her in a garden and landscape shop in Los Angeles with a price tag of several $1,000s, more than we could ever have afforded to spend. And we at the time had no place to house her. We loved her though, and she was gorgeous. She was seated on a throne, and if she were standing upright, would have probably been 9 feet tall. We made a point to visit her in that landscape shop each time we shopped at the local bookstore down the street. We dreamed of having our statue, so my husband suggested I give the landscape shop our name and number and ask them to call us if there was ever a sale. Well, I did just that, never really believing we would ever get a call, but we did get that call right before Christmas, a few months later. The shop was in a cash crunch, and if we could purchase her cash, they would let us have her for $1,200. Now, I have to tell you, that was quite a bit of money for us, but my husband insisted she heard our prayers and desires and was making it possible to purchase her, and she must have a plan. And of course, it would be a bit of a monetary sacrifice on our part, but that should be expected. So I was convinced, and we told the shopkeeper, yes, we'll come, deliver the cash. Within a week or so, they delivered Sekhmet to our apartment where she sat temporarily in our crowded living room until we could relocate her to our house in the mountains, where we created Sekhmet's mountain sanctuary in her honor. We took a video of her grotto under her house, and it can still be found on YouTube. After a time, and having had several rituals at our home in Sekhmet's mountain sanctuary, we felt Sekhmet needed access to more people. So we arranged to loan Sekhmet's statue to Ava Park of the Goddess Temple of Orange County in California to put her center stage in the temple sanctuary for all to see and enjoy. A huge public festival was planned to unveil her statue to the public. There was dancing, storytelling, offerings, and music, all done before Sekhmet's statue that was still hidden behind blood red velour curtains. When it came time to unveil the statue, something very strange, dare I say magical, actually happened. Just as the big reveal was about to happen, the curtains parted, the lights of the temple began to flicker on and off for about 30 seconds. No one knew what to attribute it to. Certainly no one was standing at the light switch manually causing the erratic flickering. It finally stopped and left most of us gathered there in awe, thinking similar thoughts. Sekhmet was telling us she was in the building. She was hearing, seeing, and lapping up all the devotion on this magical night dedicated to her. And in the months and years after the statue's installation, it was a glorious thing to behold as people attending Sunday services or other rituals would come to the feet of her statue and make their offerings and petitions. There was something about the look in their eyes as they stood or knelt before her. As for people in Egypt, an Islamic country, and their relationship with Sekhmet today, We're told women in Karnak are believed to still secretly bring offerings in their devotion to her in the darkness of night. Are they asking for Sekhmet to protect the lives of their babies or for her to quash the oppression of patriarchal religion? Of course, we can't know, but we can see the effectiveness of women steeled with bravery and courage in one Middle Eastern country after another out in the streets protesting authoritarian regimes. Today, here, now, Sekhmet, Our Lady of Tenacity Manifested, as I and many others call her, is a role model for women or anyone to have strength, tenacity, and courage, to be able to say no without shame or guilt, to set healthy boundaries so as not to be abused, misused, or exploited by anyone, friend or foe, religious institution, corporation, employer, or government. To emulate Sekhmet means to stand firm in your convictions and not conform for the sake of the status quo, who might not have your best interests at heart, especially if you're a woman or a marginalized person. Sekhmet's family orbit was one of creation. Her son, named Mehes or Nefertum, was a patron to doctors, and her consort Ta, the god of builders. She is certainly not the mercenary of patriarchal myth, but I wouldn't push her. She helps us heal our wounds or not be wounded in the first place if we emulate her values and essence. She holds the Ankh, the symbol of life, and the scepter, the symbol of power and royalty. Contemporary devotees recognize Sekhmet with her fierce and loyal heart and her laser eyes powered by the sun, striking down evil that would befall her devotees as she protects us in her loving embrace. And perhaps we call upon her in times when we need help with issues of health or abuse. She is the remover of obstacles in our path toward health, wholeness, and striving and thriving. Probably many devotees of Sekhmet will have their own stories of her help with health or other issues. One I will share involves a time when I had surgery. For hours before going under anesthesia, I prayed to Sekhmet, as well as to Isis and to Thoth, to guide the doctor's hand, to let the surgery be a success, and to not let me suffer. The last thing I remember before unconsciousness took hold was a vision in my mind's eye of Sekhmet, Isis, and several women who I knew were praying for me. I was within their protective circle. It was quite a reassuring scene to take with me as surgery began. Hours later, when I was in recovery after surgery, I felt no pain from the incisions. Nurses came to me asking if I was just being brave, assuring me I could have pain medication, but I really needed none. The surgery seemed to have left little lingering after effects, and I thank Sekhmet, Thoth, and Isis for their protection and grace, and my sisters for their prayers. I believe Sekhmet has worked her magic in many aspects of my life, and she has a permanent altar in my home. As a lioness, Sekhmet teaches about working in harmony and support, in partnership with other women, as represented by a pride of lionesses together, taking care of their cubs and family. This is the opposite of patriarchal tactics that divide and conquer women, turning them against one another, using race, class, status, ethnicity, or their competition for men, jobs, or recognition. Together, sister lionesses naturally create win-win situations so their family or community can survive and thrive rather than compete and create feelings of scarcity. In partnership, it's about working together toward a goal. It's about the we and the us, not the I and the me. These lionesses are strong and agile. They can respond in a flash, and when hunting, only take what they need to survive, never excess like greed. Lionesses can be seen going it alone or seen working together to take down prey, or lying in the sun calmly playing with their cubs. Think about this as you discern the values of goddess spirituality. peace, justice, reverence for life, equality, strength, intuition, partnership, and doing what they can to thwart greed. I'd suggest looking into some of the contemporary writings on Sekhmet and see what she and other goddesses offer women in the way of achieving wholeness, autonomy, and the strength to be one's authentic self. That said, it is vitally important we begin to recognize we are living in a culture of domination, abuse, and exploitation. We are so saturated in it, like a fish that no longer sees the water they swim in. We deem the horrible things we endure to survive as just normal in the way things are. We tell ourselves this is our human nature because we've forgotten or never learned about early goddess cultures and the societies honoring goddess that once thrived. We cannot fall victim to this thinking this domination is inevitable. We must not continue to normalize abuse. We must recognize our pervasive culture of abuse for the sins, injustices, and unacceptable practices that permeate the workplace, religion, corporations, government, media, academia, culture, society, even within our family and friends. We are still suffering the trauma of our ancestors from the gender side of the burning times and other gendercides perpetuated across the globe throughout history. We must learn to recognize abuse and exploitation from the subtle to the pervasive. We must rid ourselves of toxic people in our lives and have the courage to walk away and create new beginnings of partnership with ourselves, our family, our community, and the greater world. We must work toward a society with strong social safety nets, where we know the value of mental health, where we regularly check in with ourselves and ask both ourselves and our loved ones, how is your quality of life? Sa Sikhem Sahu.